Well, I told you that we shall be discussing oil matters here on Business Insight. And I told you, in the company of the peers in charge of petroleum, Engineer Andrew Kamau. Thank you so very much indeed for joining us here. First of all, I want to hear from you. When you look at the future trends of oil prices, do we expect a significant drop, a significant spike?
First of all, just for full disclosure, I'm not an engineer.
Oh,
thanks for the
You need to
accolade.
pay me for that. All right, we dust off and go.
I think, O'Brien, one of the things that you have to understand about the oil prices, nobody knows where the prices are going. And predictions don't mean anything. That's the second thing. The third thing is that there's a whole industry around price risk management, which is employed by those who are loading oil, producing it, refining it. Yeah. In fact, the price risk management world trades in futures and forward market 4 times the world's total production.
Wow, it's a big business.
It's a big business.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And you don't have any idea where we are going, otherwise would be betting.
If I knew where we were going, I'd either sell or buy the futures and go and live in Watamu.
Oh, beautiful. I want to hear from you. I mean, we announced to the world that we discovered oil back in the year 2012.
Yes.
It was a great news for this nation. What have we done with it?
So I think one of the things that you have to understand is the cycle of how oil is produced and what happens. So the first step, of course, is the exploration phase, which we've been in for some time, since the 50s, like you said in your introduction. And it can take a long time until you find what is commercially viable. And then you get into the appraisal phase. Now, the appraisal phase can be anything between 4 and 10 years. And then once you know exactly what's in the ground and you plan how you're going to get it out, then you go into the production phase. So we've just started the appraisal phase, finding out exactly how much is in the ground, how are we going to produce it, what kind of infrastructure will we need to get it to market. And once that's done, then it's now doing the production phase. And then once the production phase is done, that's 20 years of production. So what we've been into now is exploration, and we'll now be doing the appraisal phase, and we hope sometime next year to start the production phase.
The production phase. Yeah. Tell me this. I mean, I've had conflicting figures about the reserves that we have of oil. Do we have the exact figures of how much oil are we having now?
Well, it's a really good question, because one of the things that you hear a lot about is what is the reserve. Now, there is what's called oil in place. And the oil in place is how much oil is in the ground, but that's not what we look at. I mean, it's always nice to say it's 1 or 2 or 3 billion barrels of oil in place, but you can never get it all out of the ground. Because it's not in a container somewhere and you put a straw into there and suck it all out. No. It's like, in the old days, you used to have these ice creams that had ice thing, a Dairy Maid or whatever they were called. And that's exactly what the reservoir is like. A good reservoir is like that. And you have to displace the oil out of the spongy stone that is there and get it out. And then when we do that, then we have what are called recoverable reserves. And for the time being, what we want to develop now, because we're not going to explore the whole basin right now, is just 3 oil fields, Ngamia, Amosin, and Twiga, and they have about 250 million barrels of recoverable reserves.
250 million barrels.
Yeah.
Would you say this is significant, bearing in mind that we have countries like Saudi Arabia who would export that in about 1 year?
It's not significant, but it's a beginning. It's a beginning. I'll give you an example. So since the world began, we've drilled 80 wells in Kenya, 80 exploration wells. They have drilled 500,000 in Texas. So we're at the beginning. We've got give you the numbers.
And of course, Texas is a state in the U.S.
Which is the size of Kenya.
Which is the size of Kenya, definitely.
Yeah, so we've got a sedimentary basin where this oil can be found of 400,000 square kilometers. We've explored 10,000.
10,000.
Yeah, so we're nowhere. We are at the beginning.
We are at the beginning.
Yeah, so we don't need to get too carried away with what we found, because there could be a lot more. Now, what happens is that the minute you find oil, you get data, and it becomes more prospective. So more people want to come and explore. I said, okay, fine, there could be some oil in Kenya, offshore. We haven't even started offshore to a big extent. There could be a giant oil field offshore. And these are the things that we have to keep doing.
Exactly. Yeah. Tell me this, I mean, how much oil have we sold to the world up to this point?
Zero.
Zero?
Yeah.
Even with the tracking pilot scheme?
No ship has sailed yet.
Really?
Yes.
So the world has not tested our oil?
No.
Not yet?
Not yet.
When do they plan to do this?
So we hope by the end of June we'll have the ship arrive and take it off to some refinery, see what it looks like when it comes on the other side, and then we can assess the value of our crude oil.
How much oil do we have in our reserves at wherever it is being stored?
88,000 barrels.
88,000 barrels.
Yeah.
Very good. How much would that fetch?
It depends. Huh?
And who will take the money?
The money will go to pay for the infrastructure that we've put in place. Like I've always said, this is not a commercial venture.
Yeah.
Early oil is not a commercial venture. It's to test, first of all, the logistics. It was to test the social acceptance of the project.
Yeah.
It was to test the market. Now, we've done the social part of it. You can see at the beginning of the early oil pilot scheme, there were a lot of issues on local content, revenue share. We needed to find out what that road looked like, because all this equipment is either going to go through the port of Lamu or through the port of Mombasa. We're talking about 1.5 million tons of equipment that is going to have to be transported to Turkana. You'll need to have that infrastructure in place. And these are some of the things that we're testing. In addition to that, because it's a new crude oil, we'll obviously have to take a discount. And I would rather, as Kenya, take the discount on a smaller daily production than at full production. So if we're talking about a discount of about $3 per barrel, because it's a new crude oil, at 2,000 barrels a day, it's $6,000 per day. At 60,000 barrels a day, $180,000 per day. So you really have to be prudent about the way we manage our resources. Yeah.
I mean, when we discovered oil back in the year 2012, you know, the prices of crude of a barrel, you know, of crude oil was almost 130 shilling. I mean $30.
Yeah.
Right now we're talking about $78, $79, $80. Yeah. Are we still in business?
Yeah. So what happens is that you don't worry about what the flat price looks like. The flat price is actually irrelevant at this stage for us. What we need to do in order for the project to be sanctioned, and you hear a lot about these terms of final investment decision. What it means is that, does the project make sense at $50 per barrel?
Exactly.
Yeah. So these are the things that we are now looking at.
Point?
Yes, at this point it does.
We'll still be in business.
We'll still be in business. And this is what you need to look at. You see, O'Brien, the trouble that you see a lot of countries had at $130 is that they thought, well, the good times are here, so let's now start budgeting at $100 per barrel. And they did. Unfortunately, the price fell out of bed. And now you have there was a bust. So you've got all these expenses at $100 a barrel. The price is at 30. What do? You make a loss.
Yeah. Tell me things. I mean, you've been in this industry for quite a long time, and you have tremendous experience, you know, from Switzerland to South Africa, and so on. Tell me things. Would you advise the nation, that is Kenya, to hedge the prices?
Not necessarily. The price is going to be what the price is going to be.
You wouldn't advocate for hedging?
I don't think so at this stage. We have a small volume, and it's not significant as much. I think one of the things that we have to do is, as a country, we have a natural hedge. Because we're exporting crude and we're importing refined products. So in the one hand, we are getting money for our crude oil. On the other hand, we are paying for the products. So if we are exporting and we're not getting that much money, it means that we're also not outlaying that much cash when it comes to refined products. We're on both sides of the leg, so we have a natural hedge. You have a natural.
Now, talking about, refinery, are we likely to end up, with a situation like Nigeria, whereby it is one of the top 10 largest producer of crude oil, and yet they import the same in their country? They don't have refinery capacity. We had the Kenya oil refinery in Mombasa. We all know what happened to it. It remains there idle and lying to go to waste. What is the future, and how do we plan to go about this?
Okay, let's just take one step back. You, the motorist, were subsidizing the refinery 2 shillings and 70 cents per litre.
Because of its inefficiencies.
Exactly. Don't forget also it's an old refinery.
Yes.
And where are we situated in the Indian Ocean? There are 12 million barrels of refining capacity, 10 days sailing from us. Some of the most sophisticated refineries. So in order for us, the days are gone of building stuff for the sake of building stuff. We have to be the most competitive, and in order to be the most competitive, we need the cheapest fuel. If we are going to build a refinery for the sake of building a refinery right now with our little 60,000 barrels a day, we are going to have to convince you, the motorist, that actually it's worthwhile building the refinery, but don't worry, you'll just have to pay 5 shillings per litre more, but it's worthwhile in the long run. Or we can sell our crude for the best value, take advantage of the people who have invested in that infrastructure, and import the cheapest fuel that we can. That's one way to go. The other way is subsidize a refinery that doesn't make money. But I'm not saying that there's no refinery in our future. People are exploring offshore Kenya. We could find giant oil fields, 1 million barrels a day. Nigeria is at 2 million barrels a day. At that stage, we have a history of being prudent in the way we manage our fiscal terms. People will come and build that refinery. In fact, it's not the government who will even build it. If you look at most of the countries other than Saudi Arabia, if you look at the big refineries in India, they're all private refineries.
If you look at all big refineries in China, they're all government owned.
China's a different model. It's not a capitalist model. India is a capitalist model. And I've always advocated that why should the government has got other social things that we need to do. We need to build schools, we need housing, we need healthcare. If private sector can take care of those things, why should government be competing with private sector in those businesses?
You're a capitalist.
To the heart.
To the core.
Yes.
Very well. Let's now talk about, tell me this. Why did we fail to do an environmental impact assessment before we started, tracking oil to Lamu?
We did not fail to do that. It is a requirement by NEMA that we do it.
Was it ever done?
It was done and completed, and NEMA gave us the certificate.
The go-ahead?
Oh, yeah.
So why do the non-governmental organizations, accuse the government of rushing the whole process even before an EIA was done?
I have not heard that.
There's a Kenya National Society for NGOs. I mean, it was there in the news yesterday, saying they have never seen it. They have been asking for it. They have never seen one.
Well, I think they need to contact Talo and NEMA, and they'll get a copy.
Very well. I hope they are listening.
I hope so. Charles, if you're listening, contact NEMA.
Now, tell me this. Where have we been having problems with the communities in Turkana about compensation and reallocation of families?
I think one of the things that we've discovered is that there's a lot of disinformation. Partly because maybe as the ministry we've not really gone out and made the case and made people understand what is the process. And it has left a gap for those who are mischievous to go in there and plant seeds of, well, this is what the government wants to do, only 500 families will be compensated. So we've started now the engagement. Last week we had a meeting with the MCAs. This week coming, we're going to meet the faith-based organizations, women groups, youth, professionals, to try and explain to them what is the process of, first of all, acquiring land. There was a Gazette notice that was put out by LAPSET that we wanted to acquire land, and then the coordinates were put in there. And the story was that, there were only 500 families that were going to be compensated, which of course could not be further from the truth. Yeah.
So when do we plan to start the land acquisition process, bearing in mind that Tullow Oil has been working with a target of completing the pipeline by the year 2022? We are talking about less than 3 years from now.
Yes. So the process has begun. I don't know if you saw, there was a Gazette notice about last month, which is called the Notice to Acquire.
Yeah.
Along the whole corridor and also in Turkana. So that's the first stage. And then there's another stage.
The one that was issued by National Land Commission?
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah.
And then the next stage, of course, at every stage you have to have public consultation. And the next stage, of course, is we have to then survey the land. We then have to value it. And then the last stage is award. So all this process could take anything up to 3 to 4 months.
You're kidding me, not in Kenya.
Oh yeah, you'll be surprised. The kind of work that has been done on the LAPSET corridor. You see, one of the things that you have to understand.
I mean, look at the amount of heat that was generated by the notice to acquire, from Turkana.
But only in Turkana. If you look at all the route from Lamu to Garissa to Samburu, Isiolo, Meru, all these places, I have been there personally, speaking to the governors and the leadership in those counties. One of the things that you have to understand is that the crude oil is only part of the LAPSET corridor. So the land is actually being acquired by LAPSET. And in that corridor, there's other infrastructure. It's a 500-meter corridor. The crude oil pipe is only 50 meters. And all of these things will come with security. They'll come with better infrastructure for transporting goods and services and people. I've found that there is a lot of goodwill and a lot of people want this thing to happen and to become a success. It's such a long time since we've been hearing about LAPSET. It's time we made it a reality, and I can feel that it's going to happen. And even in my discussions with leadership in Turkana, I think people just want to get it done, but of course they want it done in a transparent way so that we know at every stage what it is that we're supposed to expect. Yeah.
Tell me this. So do you see the pipeline being completed by the year 2022?
I do.
You're confident about this?
Oh, yeah.
How would these help in pricing Kenyan oil?
Well, what's the alternative? Trucking, flying, railing? I don't know.
I'm asking you.
Pipeline is the only way to go.
How much is likely to? How much are we likely to get out of it?
I think that if you look at 60,000 barrels a day, and let's say worst case scenario, $50, $50 a barrel. What's what? $300,000 every day, $3 million a day.
That's about 300 million shillings.
Yeah.
From oil. And let me ask you this. I mean, I have had this discussion that we should forget about this oil business because it's not making any economic sense. Getting about 300 million shillings, from oil after significant investment and a series of land acquisitions. Do you share in the same?
Well, look at it this way.
Thoughts?
Look at it this way, O'Brien. So GOK, Government of Kenya, is going to invest in the land, and be a shareholder in the pipeline. Tullow, Total, Africa Oil, $2 billion. They're still prepared to go ahead.
That's about 200 billion shillings.
200 billion. They still see an upside, and they're prepared to invest after spending 200 billion shillings in this project. That should give you something to think about.
They are seeing something that we are not, probably?
No, that you are not. I see it.
You see it. Yes.
Yeah.
Good.
I think also in addition to that, don't forget that this is one project where the government is not putting any guarantees down. We're not borrowing as the government. And this is infrastructure that will be put in place for the next 20, 30 years.
Tell me this. Why haven't we been very aggressive in exploration field again since we discovered the Turkana oil?
Well, you've put your numbers there. You've seen what they've been doing. If you have a low oil price regime, people don't explore in frontier countries. Kenya is a frontier country. And as I always keep saying, we are not an oil producing country. We've only drilled 70 wells. It's what's known as a frontier. What do? They retreat to safer places like onshore US for fracking because they know I can invest quickly, I can get my money quickly. In Kenya, Tullow and partners have been here since 2006. They found the oil in 2012. It's a long gestation. It's a long gestation period. Yeah.
But appears, tell me this. I mean, there is a proposal to set up the sovereign wealth fund.
Yes.
With clear investment policies. But questions are being raised when the fund or the government of Kenya will be left to say or to have a lot of sway in the management of this fund. Would you advocate for the sovereign wealth fund to be managed by private wealth managers or for appointees of government to manage this fund?
Well, I think if you've put in the right governance structures, it doesn't matter who manages. The government can manage it. Private sector have not always been known to manage things that, in the end of the day, it's finance. Things are known to collapse, even in the private sector. So if you put good governance structures, look at Norway. The government has managed that fund well. If you look at Abu Dhabi, they've managed their fund very well. So there's nothing stopping government, and we've got lots of smart Kenyans.
The difference between the Norwegian sovereign wealth fund and our proposed fund is that yes, indeed, the fund is owned by the government, but the managers are completely independent. Ours, the scenario is expected to be different. The government is expected to own the fund and appoint the managers.
And Abu Dhabi?
Well, that's 100% owned by the government of UAE.
There you go, and they've done a very good job.
So we're likely to go for the Abu Dhabi model.
I haven't really looked at the regulations, so I can't really comment.
What would you vote for as an expert in
either
oil
way?
matters?
It's not an oil issue; it's a finance issue. But either way.
Well, but we're managing wealth from oil
and from other natural resources, mining, for example. I think either way, you will still need the transparency that's there, because if you leave it to private sector, who knows what they'll invest in? If you don't have the visibility, at the end of the day, it is the people of Kenya's money.
The money of Kenyan people. Because I have to let you go in the interest of time, tell me this, what is your message to Kenyans in regards to these oil manenos?
I think one of the things that we have to remember is that we're very lucky in Kenya, that we discovered oil later in our life cycle. We have a diversified economy. We should not let oil derail all the other industries that have been put in place. Manufacturing, tourism, agriculture. We continue with those processes, and oil will just be another addition to it. And in that way, our sovereign wealth fund will not be used so much for the continuing development. It'll be for future generations. Yes.
Is there anything else you would want us to know? Do you have another secret?
I have no other secret.
Very good.
Yeah.
Should we let you go?
Thank you, Brian.
Are you leaving us with oil dollars?
They're not there yet.
Have a good night. Thank you very much indeed. Very well. Yeah. Very good. Petroleum and mining, Petroleum Principal Secretary there, Andrew Kamau, joining us here tonight to shed us more light on the future and the past and the present of the black gold. You have heard it from him. You're watching Business Insight. We're taking a short break. We are back with more stories.